the floor, brother.
My name's Montell Neufville. I'm the current chair of the Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire Community Scrutiny Panel, former chair of the Bedfordshire Community Scrutiny Panel. I've been training members of our communities and police officers for more than a decade in a whole range of subjects, including stop and search, use of force, engaging with communities, and understanding communities, so a wide range of issues. I've done a lot of best practice work, so that means I work at a senior level with force leaders from all over the country. I advise people in different forces, and both my panel and me are regularly consulted by police officers and police leaders on ethical issues. So that's just a bit of background and context of who I am and why I come to be in front of you today. And it's very pleasing to meet so many of you today. I'd like to talk about, to start with just a few key things, and then I'll open up the floor for questions. First of all, I think it's really important that everybody is helped to be kept safe and involved in the process for keeping everybody else safe. And that includes members of our community too, at every level, at every point of interaction. So we've all got a role to play. When it comes to the police, it's also important that they represent the communities that they serve and that they use their powers fairly. It only takes a small percentage of officers not to use their powers fairly to cause major issues to the wider communities. And we all know there's some outstandingly professional officers who put themselves in danger and solve crimes and go to lots of jobs every day. But we also know there's some people who shouldn't be doing the job. There are people in blue, and I call them openly the offenders in blue, who should be arrested rather than be let loose in our streets and in our communities. One of the things that we've discovered in my area is the reasons for disproportionality. And if you ask any leader around the country, whether you're in London or Manchester or the West Midlands, they will all tell you, we don't know the drivers and the reasons for disproportionality.
Over 35 years on from the introduction of stop and search legislation, we have found that no force fully understands the impact of the use of these powers. When the police use their powers disproportionately, in differing proportions on different ethnic groups, it causes suspicion among some communities that they are being unfairly targeted. This can undermine police legitimacy, which is a fundamental aspect of the British model of policing by consent. For some, particularly Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, it can reinforce the perception that there is a culture of discrimination within the police. And, now that we have some long-awaited data on the police use of force, similar concerns are arising about this area of practice.
Well, here's the thing, we do here in Bedfordshire, and do you know how we know? Because we've studied it and we've worked it out, and we're working to solve those problems. So disproportionality is not a natural thing. It basically means officers are using their powers in a disproportionate way. And for me, the two types of disproportionality, one is when they unfairly target the Black community or people who are mixed race, and to some people who are Asian. But two is not only the unfair targeting, it's the disproportionate use of their powers. And that means if an officer reasonably suspects a person to have a dangerous item, then we would expect a type of behavior, but we would expect a completely different type of behavior if the person was suspected of having low-level drugs, for example, and they didn't represent a risk to anyone. So how officers treat those individuals can be disproportionate. So in terms of the second type of disproportionality, that means officers sometimes being overzealous, sometimes exceeding their powers, and sometimes doing things that actually we don't think that they should be doing. The other thing to bear in mind is there are around about 135,000 police officers in this country. And we often talk about whether it's Black people or people in parts of London or whatever, offended, or do they carry knives and all that. And that's where the narrative goes. But what we don't often talk about is the way that you, your friends, your family, me, my friends, my family, my relatives are treated isn't only down to us and what we're suspected of, it's down to the person who approaches us. So in terms of my training with officers, I do lots of role playing and I give them the same situation. And if there's 30 different officers, that individual will be treated completely different depending upon the officer who approaches them and encounters them. Some of them will be very fair, polite, and professional, and there'll be no issues. Others will cause a problem. And that happens a lot. So we get that in training, and by opening officers' minds to that, what I aim to do is to shine the light and the focus upon their own lived experience of being mainly a white officer, coming from usually a small town or a village, and having a pre-view of people who they are policing and they're coming across. So I find that quite a lot. But I also find that some officers may be white and maybe they could be male or they could be female. Some of them are outstanding in terms of how they approach a situation. And I recall one time when an officer graded by me outstanding. And that was the first officer to be graded outstanding in all the training I sort of gave. And I had then called her over and I had a conversation. And then I learned why she was graded outstanding. Now, to me, she looks like a white female. But here's the thing. She had a mixed race father and she had a Black sister and she was into reggae and hip hop. All her friends were Black. So here, the way she acted and the way she behaved was probably like me and you and our friends and our families and our partners. And what she often did is challenge her friends and her colleagues and her workmates. Because what people don't know is when she's in a van with other officers, and they often do what we call microaggressions, or they make comments, they don't realize that we have an ally in that van. Here's the other thing, we have allies at different stages of policing, at different rank structures, in the recruitment teams, in professional standards. You look at disciplinary issues, and on senior boards. The country is run by senior leaders. Some of you may have heard of the National Police Chief Council, and they compose of the 43 chief constables from all over the country. They come together and they interpret policy and they set the direction of what the country is going to go in. Now, just thought I'll give you those as opening remarks, and then I'll open the floor to you to deep dive into any part of policing or what you can do as part of the solution, or what I can do to help you that you wanted to talk about.
Montell, can I ask, in your 10 years, how do you see the changes happening? Is it progressive? Is it getting better? Or is it going backwards? Is it getting worse?
Very good question. Very, very good question. Some of you may have heard of the IOPC, which is called the Independent Office of Police Conduct. They've just put together a discrimination panel, and they pulled together about 20 people from all over the country. And I sat on that panel. It just started. And my presence on that panel was based upon the changes that we brought, the solutions that we found. Now, here's the thing. You've got bodies like the IOPC, HMIC, the College of Police, and Home Office make recommendations all the time. All of you have heard of the Scarman report in 1981.
What did Scarman report say? The report's general conclusion is that racial disadvantage is a current fact of British life and urgent action is needed if it is not to become an endemic, ineradicable disease, threatening the very survival of our society.
You've heard of the Macpherson report in 1999.
The Macpherson report found that racism was an important factor in the failure of the Metropolitan Police investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder. It concluded that the problems it found amounted to institutional racism and highlighted racism at both individual and institutional level.
And since then, there's been a whole raft of reports. What I always say to officers is, why is it that almost every year another major body issues reports on policing in this country and they're often ignored? The reason why that is because the feet is not held to the fire. So what I did when I came into post in Bedfordshire, I held the feet to the fire. And in here we have changes. So the Home Office came into my area and said, how come the whole country has disproportionality? So if you are black, you are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than if you're white all over the country. But when I went to Bedfordshire offices, I said, I'm not only going to hold the individual officers to account, I'm going to hold the supervisors and the sergeants to account and their inspectors for allowing it to happen. I'm going to use the same tactics that they use when they go after gangs. So what we found in Bedfordshire, first of all, the disproportionality dropped from 9 times to 3 times. The biggest drop in the country in a short space of time. And everybody was saying, how did you get that drop? But then I started to look at that 3 times more likely. And I said at the top of the call, why is it that we've got answers to some of the questions, but not all the answers are being implemented? But I'll tell you what the answers are. I'll be open with you. I was looking into why you are still 3 times more likely to be stopped and searched, because that's still not acceptable. Well, I started checking individual officers, and it took me nearly 2 years to work it out. And I'm now going to tell you the answer. The answer is the vast majority of officers either don't do stop and searches because of their units, or they do very few. So in our area, it's going to be like 85%. Now, so where does this disproportionality come from? There's 3 main groups. The first group is, I bet nobody on this call was aware that when you join the police, you are called a probationer. So you are on probation. And you get a number of targets. One of your targets is to do 5 stop and searches. The problem that we have is when they're under pressure for their job, who are they going to stop and search? They're not going to go to Waitrose or Sainsbury's and stop and search a middle-aged white lady because you might stop from a shop. They're going to go to people who look like me and you. So the first thing that we did in our area is we started to target those new recruits.
Sorry, Montell, sorry, quickly. So is it a case of they've got to reach these targets then, and with easy option?
Yes. So that's one of them, one reason. Okay. There's another reason. Every police force has got a specialist unit. In London, you've actually got 2. You've got Trident and you've got TSG. We've got Bolton, but it's got a different name in every area, and they're usually an anti-gang unit. Here's the problem with those units. The people who tend to join those units tend to be, and I quote the word to them, white boys.
Right.
They think they can do what they want to anybody who they want, and they make the rules. They think they are above the law. And I tell them they're not above the law. They have the same power as any other police officer. So the second problem is individual officers. And I have to tell you this, there's some people who are afraid of them, including their colleagues, because of how they act and how they behave. But just as we would take down a gang, we need to take down people who think the law doesn't apply to them. That's group number 2. And group number 3 is there's a small percentage of officers in every force area who do the most stop and search. And that's whereby we keep an eye on. The same tactic again, officers use when they're looking at burglaries, or they're looking at rapes, or any other type of offence. They will look at what they call prolific offenders, right? I look at prolific offenders in blue.
Right.
I look at officers in blue uniform who stop and sit people in the black community without making arrests or making very few arrests. Or if they stop and sit, and a lot of people from the black community, I watch the video of the officers' interaction to monitor them. And we tell all officers that we are doing this. We are deep diving on them to check their behavior. And it's just like when you put a camera in a shop, or you put a camera in a school, people know they're being watched, they change their behavior. There's some of the key drivers that we've done here. And some of these key lessons are now being shared with other forces, because we want every force everywhere to take on board these lessons and treat people fairly. Sorry, over to you for your next question.
A quick question, Montell. How do we find out if officers have any charges against them?
Okay, so there's two-part question. So on every police website, whether it's the Met Police or Bedfordshire or Hertfordshire, there's an organisation called Professional Standards, and they publish on the website people who's been disciplined. Now, you only find out officers if it's been upheld. Okay, so if they've taken action and they've upheld or they've charged an officer, that's number one. The second part is you can do a freedom of information request to the police force or to the police crime commissioner. That's outside London. In London, it's to MOPAC, it's to the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. You do freedom of information and you ask for the type of data that you want. Now, it wouldn't identify particular officers. It would only identify particular officers if they've been charged with an offence, but then usually they wouldn't be in the force.
But we've heard that, say, when it comes to the IOPC, where you may, where you'd lodge a complaint about an officer, I'm sure many of us has heard that basically police don't investigate police. Yeah, so is it the same for the IOPC?
Okay, so let me just walk you through how both bodies work. So in terms of the complaint system, what happens when you make a complaint? And this is another change that we've introduced in my area. Again, just to remind you, my area now covers Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, and Cambridgeshire, 2.5 million people. Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire don't have a very big diverse community, but they've got the same professional standards department. And what we were finding is that they weren't upholding discrimination cases. And the reason why is because they don't know what discrimination is, especially when it's to do with discrimination of colour. They get very confused. They think to discriminate is the same as using the N-word. And what I try to teach them and educate them about is discrimination is how you treat people. Racism is using offensive language. So the first part of the question, there's a department called the Professional Standards Department everywhere, which is the first point of call. What we now have is a diverse panel in Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, which reviews cases. Now it's all redacted, but we double check if discrimination occurred or not. And that panel is 15 people, it's diverse, including, for the first time, 3 or 4 young people, including young Black people. That's point number one. Point number two, the IOPC deal with the most serious cases. So they deal with murder or death in police custody, or death at the hands of the police rather than murder. And they deal with serious sexual offences. They now deal with discrimination cases, but with regards to discrimination cases, they mainly are looking for best practice and directions of travel, and to ensure that officers or forces are looking at the law as they should. However, one of the reasons why I joined the IOPC is because if forces aren't getting it right across the country, they can't be doing it right themselves at the IOPC. That's why I've recently joined.
before I actually ask my question, I was wondering what is an IOPC? I don't know.
Sorry. I'll explain that to you. It's called the Independent Office of Police Conduct. So how it works is the country split up into 43 separate police forces, and then obviously you've got the Metropolitan Police in London, and then you've got 3 other bodies that oversee policing. First of all, you've got HMIC, Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, and they are like Ofsted to police force. Second, you have the College of Police, and they're responsible for training. And then the IOPC stands for the Independent Office of Police Conduct, and they investigate policing. They consist of roughly 50% ex-police officers and 50% ex-lawyers and other investigating people, but they are totally independent from the police, and they report direct to the Home Office, and their job is to make recommendations for UK policing.
You say we have. You said, I think you did say that we have allies or whatever. But yeah. To be honest with you, I mean, we may have allies, but they're just, I see them as insignificant. So it doesn't really, because it's not getting us anywhere, having these allies, because they're insignificant. It may come in an individual package, but it's not a collective mass of people. I mean, I don't know why we call them allies, because they come as individual figures, or a handful of figures. It becomes very insignificant. So I can't really see why we call them allies. You see, there's not enough. And also, I was wondering as well that you said that you said that that the reason why I feel that people, I think police officers, they speak in codes, like, you know, when they say, you know, they have to actually qualify, they have to stop and search or whatever. It's like a code. They're giving out a code, like, you know, they're speaking in code language, so they know who to go after, like, you know, and that's how I see it. Yeah, if you could answer my first question.
Okay. So the first question, the best way for me to explain that is to just to tell you a little bit about police culture and how the police work. So I did mention 43 forces, roughly 135,000, roughly up to 30% are female, about 12% are openly gay, and there's 27% BAME. I speak to many senior officers all over the country all the time, and there's what I call push and pull in policing. And there's the push is those officers who are, they tend to be white male, sometimes they could be white female, who are what I call aggressive, and they go in hard and they join the job because they want to kick down doors and they don't care about anything else. But then you've got the other group who are caring and compassionate. Sometimes they are former teachers or youth workers, or they've got partners who are Black or Asian or whatever. And I come across 2 completely different views and groups and personality. No matter what force you go in, you'll come across these 2 different personality. The other thing is at the National Police Council, every senior leader takes a portfolio. One of the portfolios is race and inclusion. Another one is equality, diversity, and inclusion. So how they're driven forward depends upon the passion and the interest of the individual people. Some officers, because you probably know that policing is a very macho field. So not only are there people who are openly, and we know this, let's cut to the chase, there are racist officers, let's be clear, right? There are also sexist officers too, and homophobic ones too. Some of those officers who experience those become allies of people who are not like that, because quite often there are individual, again, not all, but some white males who are a problem for me, you, and everybody else. And then when you get into policing, you quickly get to understand a lot of these personalities because a lot of how policing works is down to the individual people, down to the individual senior commander or chief constable, them being influenced, and then using the powers how it should be used.
You know, how do we have allies in a situation like this?
Okay, so I'll explain it in a different way. So what we have is in every single police force, there's a Black Police Association. Okay, that's your ally. Okay, just to cut straight to the point. Number one. Number two, there's a lead in every force area, and in London, a borough command unit, who's responsible for recruitment, progression, and retention. And one of their jobs is to go out to recruit and engage and keep in policing people who look like me and you. The third potential allies are some people in professional standards, because it's their job to take down bad cops and bad cops who discriminate. And when you join meetings and when you get to know individual people, you quickly know who those allies are and who they're not. So quite often there's a lot of it works and happens behind the scenes. So I know in my area, people who join my panels quickly know that by how people act and how they behave. I'm not sure if Martin knows, because he's been to a few of my panels previously. I've roughed up some senior officers in my area because of how they speak and because of the language they use and because of who they are and how they behave. Others are very professional, and they're the type of people we need to be looking after our communities. Does that answer your question better?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Yes.
It's two questions really. How many Black officers are there in Bedfordshire? And I'm actually just I'm not talking BAME. I'm just talking like Black African Caribbean mixed race. Yeah. Not
enough. There's 21, which is terrible, and there's
21 in the whole of Bedfordshire.
Yeah, out of 1,350. So that's tiny. And it should be a lot more than that, but that's the numbers.
Okay, and my second question is, how does Bed's police compare to like the other forces like Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, etc., with dealing with the Black community? Are they?
Okay, so Bedfordshire is far more diverse. If you look at Bedfordshire as 3 London boroughs. So you've got Luton, which could be like Islington in terms of its population dynamics and its makeup is the same as Islington. And then you look at Bedford Borough, which would be like Barnet or maybe Brent. And then you look at Central Bedfordshire, which would be maybe Croydon. Okay, so in terms of our size of population, 650,000 people, in those 3 areas is around about 200,000 each. Now, Central Bedfordshire is almost all white. The other 2 areas are very diverse. Luton got a big Asian population, but a reasonably big Black and mixed race population. Bedford has got a tiny Asian population, but it's got a very diverse Eastern European and Italian population. Hertfordshire has got 97% white population. Cambridgeshire, 94% white. Cambridgeshire's got a big Eastern European population. Now, in terms of how officers act and behave, we've got 2 different force levels. We've got the county force, which is Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, and Cambridgeshire. And then we've got the Triforce. The Triforce is all the armed police, the dodge police, and the road policing unit. So that's in a separate unit that covers all 3. And that's one of the ones which I scrutinise. I will also be doing some training, advice, and guidance for Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire Police. So in all of them, there's a senior leader at superintendent rank whose job is, I mentioned earlier, recruitment, progression, and retention. I just really want to elaborate on a question that's posted into chat from Abdul. And I agree with you. I agree. There are some people who I meet and who you meet who are racist, and there's different types of racist people we know. But to me, the most dangerous racist people aren't those who call me and you a name, because we know who they are, right?
Right, I agree. I agree.
The dangerous ones are who's got that mindset, who smile at us, but we know they're racist by their actions, right?
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
They are the dangerous ones, and sometimes you can't change them. Well, there's two types of ones. There's people who are racist through ignorance, and you can change them because they didn't know better. And I've had people in training, like I've done training, and we've got a guy in our my professional standards unit who's a senior officer. And we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and he said to the group, when I first always took part in a training session from Montell about 7 years ago, I thought all this liberal stuff, all this wokeism, all the other officers were getting it. I didn't agree. I didn't get it. And he's told everybody it took him 5 years to get it. 5 years. But now he's completely on board. Now he understands where he was going wrong. And he said it was partly down to his upbringing. And when he joined the job, he was really excited. He was a young officer at the time. He was a sergeant when he took part in the first training workshop. But now he's a convert, and he put up his hand and he tells everybody he's a changed person. But he comes across people who don't get it. But I've learned from people like him that some people get it straight away. Some people get it in the medium term. But he's what you call a long-term convert.
Do you think they should be running background checks on individuals before they actually can pass the test or the exam to be a policeman?
They absolutely do. They do. So what professional standards do, as well as investigate rogue officers, is they refer to the scrutiny panels in each force area.
Wow.
Officers whereby they've conducted a detailed background check, and it's a DBS check for anybody who wants to know. And we get referrals for people who complain, because what you get is a disproportionate people who are Black and Asian who get turned down from joining the police. And the main reason why those people are turned down is because we've got large extended families, tends to be more than white British families. And what they do is, if any of your extended family, maybe even ones that could be your immediate family, but even if they don't live with you, if they've got either criminal record or they've been in contact with the police a number of times, then they often reject that individual.
Right.
Now, if that individual, say it was you, you can then appeal.
Right. Okay.
Appeal goes to somebody else. So in our area, that would come to our panel, and we would look at it just to ensure the HR team didn't act with bias. And that panel can overturn the HR team. Now, I'm not sure how it works in the Met, because our panel, which does that, only started in 2020.
Right. So would you say that affects the number then, the numbers of our
It does.
representation?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
is that another psychology then for them to say, well, you can keep them out because we know that a lot of their family or family ties may be criminally active in some way?
Yeah. So, but that's why the panel can overturn it. So basically, how it works is, let's say, and we have overturned some, because it could be, let's say that you wanted to join the police and you didn't know that you had a cousin who was arrested 3 years ago for burglary, and in 5 years before that, their son or daughter did some shoplifting, but you didn't know. Okay, so we would look at everything in the round, and we would say, actually, on this, we either agree with you, being the HR team, or we overturn it. So it's a bit like a school's appeal board, when a person either gets thrown out of school or whatever, it goes to a appeal board. What we have in our area is a similar board like that, because the people who make that decision are 99% right.
Right. So if you overturn it, the person can get the job?
Yeah.
Right.
Hi.
Montell,
Hello, mate.
it's Victor, man.
Oh, Victor, how you doing, mate?
How you doing, bro? It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been a long time, bro.
You know, my career is in security, so because we're working together in Marsh Farm Community Development Trust.
I do, yes, mate.
And so my two questions are coming from, well, one of them I just want to see your opinion, but the first question, my question is, because I deal with training of security guards and officers in CCTV, close protection, and door supervision, all types of security, key holding, all the way to clamping, all kinds of arrest procedures and stuff. The kind of training that they're getting, everyone seems to say the same thing. When problems arise, they need to be retrained. Now, how is it possible that we've been going for so long and complaints have been going on for so long and atrocities continue to happen that the training doesn't seem to have been changed, and no one seems to have got to the bottom of that? Why is that?
Fantastic question. So thank you.
Because I do a security course, and they most of them are ethnic minorities, because it's one of them easy things to get into to get employed, right?
Yeah.
So if you need employment quickly, you do the training course, and you're ethnic minority, and you've got a security badge, and you're good for 3 years. But now, but police forces seem to recruit their own people that look like them, if you know what I mean. And we don't seem to get a look at, because we're only like 5% of the population.
Yeah. So you got
that's why I'm asking.
You got 2 points there. I'm going to take your last point first, if you don't mind, right? So first of all, you are right. They do recruit their own. Now, why does that happen? That happens because when people tend to go to any career, one of the main drivers is what their parents went into, right? And most of the police officers are white, so a lot of the people who go into it tend to be white. Second is they go through cadets, and because you worked with cadets and young people as well, and we've done that over the years, and most of the cadets are white. I've done 4 years of cadet training to do bias and racism workshops. Very, very, very few black kids I've come across. So to answer the last question, you're right. They tend to pull from a pool that looks like a certain demographic. And then your other point, again, that's a really good point that you raised. Now, when you do your training, one of the main things that you do is something called de-escalation. Okay, you control situations and you reduce them down. So that falls into the field of use of force. And as you know, our panel deals with use of force. Now, there is a use of force problem. I'm going to be absolutely clear about that. And that's all over the country. We're only now starting to monitor and measure that. But you asked another question. And this question was, a problem arises, and then they talk about retraining officers. Now, here's the thing. What people don't realize is at the moment, there's a lot of young officers, there's a lot of student officers. In our area, there's 400 of the 1,400 officers are young. Now, of the young officers, the most inexperienced officers in every force, including the Met and every other force area, they go, first of all, to what's called the response team. The response team deals with 999. So that tends to be the most high profile. That tends to be the jobs that they come in contact with me or you. Only after they've done 2 or 3 more years experience do they then go to domestic abuse teams and cybercrime teams and all the other teams. So they tend to use the ones who need the most training in the frontline jobs to go to lots of different jobs to gain experience before they moved on. I hope that answers the question, Vic.
Yeah, I'll answer the question. The opinion, because I just wanted to know how much influence someone like me could be in a level 4 security be on training for police in the future. Who would I go to for that?
Conversation, because
yeah, okay.
Starting a conversation with Hertfordshire Police. Okay, and I think that is a good input that you can have with that.
I'm just basically, I'm surprised that I could even be an influence. I just wanted to know if I could be. That's cool. I will call you in the future. My opinion, though,
you can be.
Is the IPCC required? Is it needed?
It's needed, but I'm going to tell you what I said in the very first meeting, because again, we had the first meeting that I joined. And again, like all these scrutiny meetings, when I went into my first meeting, it was ineffective. Let's go cut straight to the chase. Again, you've known me for a long time, but I changed them around. It took a while. I had to understand them, I had to get allies on board, but I changed practice. I had to move people out, I had to move things around, put in different ways to measure, do a lot of training, etc. It took time, but we brought about change, and then we moved on and bring about change in other places. Now, the IOPC,
No, not the IOPC, the IPCC.
Well,
Festus.
they have superseded the IPCC. That no longer.
Oh, cool. Well, so what's Festus doing then?
Oh, sorry, the PCC, so the Police Crime Commission.
Yeah.
What they used to have is what's called the police authority, and police authorities used to consist of a similar body that what we have in MOPAC, the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, and that was elected representatives together with some local representatives who hold the police to account. Now, in 2012, the Conservative government under David Cameron changed it around so that they either have a mayor or they have a police crime commissioner in an area. And that police crime commissioner has got two main roles, just so that everybody knows the role of a police crime commissioner. Number one, to hold the chief constable to account. And number two, to support the community to deliver a police and crime plan. So everybody can get involved in identifying the priorities. And then the police crime commissioner or the mayor, like in London or other parts of the country, can fund priorities. So that could be anti-night crime campaigns, it could be violence against women and girls campaigns, anti-bullying campaigns, and they have a committee that makes those of the.
My brother was in the Holborn Police Force, stroke Metropolitan Police Force for up to 28 years. He's retired about 3 years ago now. And he worked in all of the divisions, the paedophilia, the Trident, black on black crimes, and the gun crimes. And he said that he could see things going on within the group of, I say the establishment, that were predominantly white officers making unsuggested comments throughout his career. Now, he felt if he had complained about their behaviour, it would have seen very much something against them or against him, being a typical, I'd say, black man complaining about so-called racist officers. Not to say they're racist, but there may be some bad officers within that community. Now, do you think that when you have like the IPCC and the IPC, whatever it is, they are just there just to water things down and just keep the public up to date with things that the public need to know? Because when you look at the Metropolitan Police Force, it is in such a dire format. What we've got now, as we've seen over recent weeks, is Cassandra Dick being sacked by the Lord Mayor of London, Zahid Khan, because it was found that the behaviour from a proportionate group within the Met were behaving inappropriately. And it's still going on. And it must start from the top down or the bottom up. I don't know. How they recruit these officers into the fraternity now. And only the other day on the news are talking about bringing in more black police officers. Do you think they're just bringing them in for to match numbers, or what the public have requested, or what they feel they lack in the black community? Personally, I think they're just bringing them in as a token gesture.
Agreed.
And nothing's happened. And it will be like this. I'll be pushing the daisies up in about 50 years, maybe more, but I don't think anything will change.
Fantastic question. So just so everybody is aware, what happens with a professional standards department, they deal with complaints. But what you probably aren't aware is more than half the complaints are internal complaints. In other words, officers complaining about the language and the behaviour of their colleagues. So most of the discrimination complaints come from their colleagues. That's just something that I learned in the past 2 years. And this is all over the country. It's in the Met, it's in Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, everywhere. Most complaints come from police officers. That is the point number one. But your other point, which is a really important point, is then what happens. And when an officer makes a complaint about their colleague acting in a way which is racist, now the person who makes a complaint, they're often black or sometimes mixed race, but they're sometimes white officers complaining about another officer. What then happens is it's then looked at by professional standards. Too few times that is upheld. What we've asked to be done in our area is, number one, then to be deep dived, and number two, for us to go through to review why they think it's not a discrimination case. And what we found, because we've only been doing this, again, I mentioned from the end of 2020, so it's quite recent. First of all, too many white investigating officers didn't see it as a discrimination case. But I'm quite sure that you would, and everybody on this call would, see it clearly as a discrimination case. So when it goes to this new panel that we put together, which is a PSD panel, professional standards panel, but it's a diverse panel, it's got 4 or 5 officers on it, but they're just there to support and to get the opinion. Everybody is of one mind. It's clearly discrimination. That happens quite a lot. Now, usually there's times whereby it's not upheld, and they come up with what I describe to them as stupid reasons or ignorant reasons, or reasons that maybe they don't understand because of their own culture, their own upbringing. And okay, we might call it ignorance, okay? But they come up with words whereby, to me and you, it is clearly, you shouldn't have that person doing the investigation. So we're understanding that one of the reasons why they're not being upheld is because who's doing the investigation and the test that they're putting in place. So what I'm currently working on is what I call a neutral measure. So what we've done for Bedfordshire is we've done what's called a traffic light system, and it goes from 1, 2, 3, which is green, 4, 5, 6, which is amber, 7, 8, 9, which is red. And that's to do with any use of force, like what Victor was talking about. The panel then grade it on that scale. Independent neutral panel grade it. And then we can have a diverse panel, and that is graded based upon the behavior and the action of the officer. And then I'm now going to be working on another scale to do with discrimination, because many of the white colleagues and trainers and people who investigate don't quite know, and they use what I call a subjective investigation tool, or they don't think it's racist because that person didn't mean to be racist. And I fed back and I said, well, how do you know? You went there at the time, and actually to me, that's clearly racist all day long. And then it becomes a subjective point of view. So if you use a scale, if you use a neutral tool, then you're taking that subjectivity away from it. That's why we have a problem in the first place. You have an individual officer. For example, what a police officer could do that you wouldn't know they're doing, so they could say to their colleague in a car, I'm going to play Stop the Black Man today. And they can be as polite as what they want, stop 10 black people, and those black people won't know and they won't make a complaint. So we'll only know because the colleagues put in a complaint. That's number one. Number two, officers are told now in my area, they must always use the body-worn video when they're interacting with members of the public. Now, they should really do it in London and everywhere else too, okay? But we don't have any jurisdiction in those areas. We've only got it in our areas. So we mandate that they use that. So when we hear about a complaint of a pattern of behavior, then we investigate and we pull down all these body-worn videos and we look at it. And then we say to the officer, why have you stopped all these people? Reasonable grounds did not exist. Now, they would have to have a very clear rationale for that not to be racist, because racist is how you behave. So I hope that answers your question.
you know, it's similar to what Richard was saying, but the black people that represent are the black men and women that are in the police force. Are they supported? Do they feel like they can actually come back and say, look, you know what, them man there's racist? Like Richard was saying, like there are people further up than them that give them the impression that, you know what, you're not black no more. You're blue, innit? You're part of the force. So you just have to toe the line.
Great question. First thing I'll say is on an individual police officer's point of view. So everyone takes it personally an individual to them. That's number one. But the key driver, what I find, is they want to conform, they want to crack on, they want to get on with the job, and they don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. And it's very interesting. I was talking to two officers 2 weeks ago. One was black, one was white. The white one was the boss, and the black one was his support sergeant. Okay. And the person doing all the talking is usually always the senior officer. But then I always say to everybody else, what do you think? What do you think? And then he was talking back to me because I gave him the space to talk. And then he said this, in my area whereby I patrolled, I had a lot of racism from my colleagues. And his boss said, I didn't know that. You work with me every day and you didn't tell me that. How could you tell Montell? You've only known him for about an hour. Now, the reason why he told me, number one, he felt comfortable to tell me.
That's
Number
right.
two, I gave him the platform to talk, and I listened, and he knew that action would be taken. But yet the person that he works with every day, his direct boss, at the time he didn't feel he could tell him, but because we had this open forum where everything was on the table, we needed to deep dive. So you're right, and that's one reason why when people said to me, why don't you join in? You can join in as a senior officer. You can be a chief inspector or superintendent Montell. I said, no, I want to be independent to hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah, Montell, do you not think that police should be taught the law to be law enforcers, but it don't seems like they actually know law?
Okay, great question. So just to let you know how police training works, first of all, every officer in every area gets what's called initial training, and that varies from 12 weeks to 16 weeks. So in London, it's in Hendon. In Bedfordshire, they go to a place called Dunstable, and in Hertfordshire, they go to Welwyn Garden City. So they go to a place where it's classed with base, number one. Number two, they then go out, and actually, right, that involves all the laws, all the policies, and safety training, which Flaps was talking about earlier on. So the physical stuff and the main laws, that's number one. Number two, they then have to pass a NVQ, which has got 10 different modules, and that includes interviewing victims of crime, interviewing, going to a road crash, a road incident, doing, as you mentioned, stop and search, making an arrest, all the 10 major parts of the job, and they have to get that signed off by an assessor. Then they go out with a tutor. So the tutor goes out with them, and the tutor watches them on the job. So sometimes when you see two officers doing something, often there's a student officer with a tutor. So then if they get signed off, if they want to do more training or specialist training, like for example, the cybercrime team get extra training on that. In Bedfordshire, when I was coming across lots of the same issues all the time, I said to the senior officer, your officers don't understand the law. They don't understand reasonable grounds. We need to remind them all what constitutes reasonable grounds to meet every officer who uses stop and search powers. So that is all the neighbourhood officers or the response officers and all the bosun ones. So 30 to 50 at a time was brought on Zoom calls, and we went through testing and information so that they had to pass the test and understand what constituted reasonable grounds, but understand culture as well. And finally, in terms of training on the law, when they go for promotion, they have to pass tests. So they pass a test for sergeant and for inspector. Beyond that, they go to what's called a promotions board. So the promotion board is like an interview panel.
Do they also have exams on their policies and codes of conducts?
Yeah, so they have, so now what the new intake have to do now is you now have to have a degree when you join the police, but you can apply to join the police, and then there's there's two different entry schemes. One entry scheme is if you didn't have a degree, you can undertake your degree while you were studying, and you've got 3 years to pass, and that includes all the laws and all the policies. But let's be clear, there's loads of laws, and no officer knows all of them. Okay, I know a lot more about laws than an officer.
Can I just say, Montell,
Yes,
I think
yes.
you've done a great job in what you're doing and what you're trying to make happen. It's obviously an uphill struggle, and we need more like you out there at the end of the day, because this thing needs to be balanced. And as you can see, as what's going on right now around, especially in London with child queue and all these things, we need that help. It's just so, like Richard said, it's the institution, the establishment.
Can I quickly talk about, have I got time to talk about child queue?
Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
Yep.
So just to educate people about some of the work which I was doing in 2018, which why the child queue situation wouldn't have happened in Bedfordshire. So first of all, in 2018, we found that 75% of stop and searches were through where the police gave drugs as a reason, which is the Misuse of Drugs Act. Okay, they gave weak grounds. But the College of Police stated that the smell of cannabis alone are no longer sufficient grounds. So we advised all our officers that, and a lot of officers pushed against that. They say, well, we need the smell of drugs because that gives us grounds to go in and search for other things. And we had inspectors and sergeants arguing against it, saying, we're still going to look for that. So I said, okay.
That's interesting.
I said, okay, so what's going to happen is this. If you only use the smell of drugs, you will be graded amber 6 or red 7. You won't be green, and every officer wants to be green 1. And what that means is it'll go on your record. So if you want to go into to get promotion or go into the road unit and you want to drive the fast cars, then obviously that will come up, okay? Because you are abusing your power. You are acting unlawfully according to the panel, and we will deep dive you. We're going to check you. We're going to put you on our watch list. What happened in 2018 in Bedfordshire is the smell of cannabis was no longer solely used, even though officers might have said, oh, that bloody Montell stopping me from doing my job. But the benefit of that, it protected our kids.
Yes, yes.
Right, that's right.
That's something that they need to know, you know. That's something that they need to know. Because that's something that they used to pull us up all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing smoking, but they could be in a room with people smoking or whatever.
Exactly. That's right. And the policy stated you can't use that as your power. You may want to use it. Okay, abuse your power, but there'll be consequences. Not only for you, there'll be consequences for your boss. Because we called in a sergeant and we said we've had 3 of your 5 officers abusing their power. That's on you.
Doesn't that warrant a retrain for the officers? There has to be some form of deterrent.
Well, because what it is training. Remember what training is, right? Training is giving people information, right? So what do people do when they get information? Either think, that's great, I'm going to use it, or I'm going to forget it, or I'm deliberately not going to use it, right? Which is great.
Yeah.
Because training is giving you information. So what we say is you've signed off that you've done this training, okay? We're going to measure you to it because you've got no excuse. That's the standard that you're going to be held to now.
You see, the thing is, if they see us as human beings, then they wouldn't have to. They would need to be trained. They would need no training as such to actually you know what I mean? Because it's only if they're prejudiced, they will need training. They will need training. Anyway, as a little side issue there, I'm just going to give a little revelation. When I was in prison, the prison system was using drugs in the prison system openly. I couldn't believe it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if they could choose whether to actually do something about it, or if they were to leave you alone, they would leave you alone. You know what I'm saying? So it makes me realize that, you know, that the system, the state isn't actually really going after. They only choose to go after people that does drugs, when they want to do it. But they're be serious in solving the drug issue.
I agree.
They're not, honestly, they're not.
I agree. And then just a quick point on that, if you don't mind. You've all heard of the term over-policing. And one of the things I talk about is it's not only the frontline officers that I'm looking for, because I talk to hundreds of officers. I'm looking for the senior officers who act in a way which is abusing their power by over-policing. And here's an example. One of my areas is Hertfordshire, and it includes one of the richest parts of the country. But you know what they do in that area? Lots of people take drugs. But the senior commander gets no officers to go to those private schools and all those areas because they're the children of well-off people and business owners and councillors and white politicians. But what they will do is they'll go across the county border to Bedford and Luton because there's lots of black people there, and they would over-police in those areas. So one of the things that we need to do is hold them to account. Now, one of the senior officers said, well, I take offense to that because I'm basing it on statistics. And I go, we can make statistics look any way you want.
True.
But remember, rank has no privilege.
Targets, they're meeting targets.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's easy to see a black youth and say,
Right.
Exactly.
who's got that or wherever. We're going to put it
Yeah, but behind all of that, the police force is a corporation trading for profit.
No,
as far as I'm aware, yeah.
No,
so
that's not the case.
What? It's not. That's not how it works.
They're not registered as a corporation.
No.
It's
What
not
you have,
PLC.
okay, so just to let people know, what you have is you've got three types of organizations. You've got the third sector, which is charities and community groups. Second sector, which is businesses, and then you've got the public sector. So the public sector are obviously the police, schools, the government, local and central government, etc. So with police forces, they get paid no matter what happens, okay? The issue, remember the issue is individual behavior. We're talking about individual people. So individual people can choose to do the job well, professionally, look after people, protect people, or they can choose to abuse it, or they can choose to do as little as possible in the public sector because to them, it doesn't matter. Sometimes they get pressure from boss or they get pressure from mom to do whatever they tell them to do, okay? But one of the main things that you get changed in this country is understanding what that boss or mom motivates them, because they tell the constables what to do. The constable ain't gonna listen to the young black guy on a bike on a dark Tuesday night, or me and you in our car. If we protest or we like, they're gonna listen to it, but they listen to the boss, right? Because actually what I've had in Bedfordshire, and this changed my opinion of policing, of professional standards. What they did was they had a complaint against an officer. Now, to me and you, it was a minor, nothing complaint, okay? Not a series of the type that we're all talking about here today. What they did, in a plainclothes car, they went behind this armed police car, they got out, and they said, are you PC 1, 2, 3, 4? Yes, we are. Get out your car. Give me your handcuffs, give me your gun, give me everything. Get in the back of my car, I'm going to put you in handcuffs. And they said, what for? What for? We'll tell you when we get to the station. They take him, because you take an officer to a different station, not to the home force. They put him in a cell. Now, he didn't know why he was in a cell overnight, and then stripped of all his clothes and told to go home. All his police uniform, told to go home, okay? And then I had a case in front of me, and I was reviewing, and I goes, wow, I didn't know you did that to police officers. What did he do? And I was thinking, beat somebody up, stealing real loads of money, or whatever, something really, really high level, okay? What he did was he looked up on a computer for something of a job that was going on that he might have known the person. And I said to the boss, you've got the power to do that to an individual officer, right? When he does something, to me, minor. And I see major things happening, like what we're talking about today. And I said, that's what you need to do to the offenders in blue. So when I was doing training, I reminded them of this case, and I said, that could be you. And remember, rank has no privilege. If you're an inspector, chief inspector, you could be handcuffed and taken to cell whilst it's being investigated.
So he looked up, what did he do? He looked up.
A job. So basically, the police were called to a house, and he knew the person who lived in the house. Okay, so it wasn't his job; it was another officer's job, and they're not allowed to look at that because of data protection, right? So he wanted to know all the details about what was going on. That's against the rules. Okay, but we've seen much more serious things, haven't we, on videos and YouTube and Facebook and.
I think he was being off code. That's what it is. If he's been off code, then he will get disciplined. But if he's actually been discriminating against people like you and me, that's not being off code. So he'd be let off.
Yeah. So what I said is, with my panel, we're going to use the same power to go after the offender in blue. Suddenly, they all change their behaviour. Well, not all of them, because we're still looking for some of them, right? But a lot of them, enough changed it to make it change all the data. So we're still looking at offenders. So, like, for example, in your area, you might have less burglaries, but you still might have some burglaries, right? Okay. At least we've got it down, and we're looking for some of the people, because we've got a watch list now of officers.
You know, it's funny you say that. Like, in your area, you might have a lot of burglaries. I live in town. And in my area, it was known that the police know who's burglaring, who's robbing, and where, and they will allow it to go on for a period of time until they decide that they're going to go and raid such and such house and this house. So the crime rate's still going on. Things are still happening. People are still losing, getting robbed, and cars are getting broken into. And you understand, drugs are being taken on the street. They will allow that to go on for how many months until they decide they're going to go and raid such and such house where they know the goods are going to be kept, where the drugs have been taken, where it's been smoked. What kind of policing is that? It's an uphill struggle, I understand. I understand you've got an uphill struggle, and what you're doing is good, but does it really make, I mean, obviously, Abdul and some other guys, Richard, it's like, we don't really believe that it's not making a difference. But it has to be making a difference, because obviously what you're telling us, and we can hear that, and you're doing a great job. But what kind of policing?
Yeah, so two things on that. So first of all, on what you're saying, just so that everybody is aware how policing works in this country, every neighbourhood, which is a local authority ward, wherever you live, you can have neighbourhood priorities. So that means, right, that you can look in your police website, you can put your postcode and look for your neighbourhood priorities. So you might say, our area is car crime, or our area is burglary. Now, what officers do is they get given tasks to do. So it could be like a project. So if they covered your area, it could be their task is to do a project around burglaries. That's number one. And that's the response team, okay? So they can do that all the time in each area. In addition to that, you've got another layer of policing, and they are the detectives. They're the ones who take a bit more time planning to get evidence, to track prolific offenders. They put people on the watch list. They go after certain gangs, and then when they got enough, they raid. So they might raid 5 places at once. So they might say, okay, we're going to call it Operation Sparkle. We'll give it to Chief Inspector. You've got 30 officers. You've got 4 spots. You've been watching areas and people for a certain time. At 4 o'clock in the morning on a certain day, we're going to go to all these locations and kick down the doors. So you've got those 2 different levels going on all the time right across the country.
I might speak for most people here. Relevant is that I got a mixed race stepson, and I've always said to him, he's a smart guy, he's very switched on, and he's very rounded. I've always said to him, like I do myself, if you ever get stopped by the police, listen to what they have to say, take it in, don't be rude or impolite in any way or impersonal towards them. And if you can record it, or get a friend to record it, because they will have their camcorders on and they're more likely to believe the police officer rather than the actual person or persons actually stopping. If we look at the George Floyd case, if there is no footage, nothing would happen. So I'd always say to him, just be clever, just be smart, don't be rude, and just video it. And they cannot stop you from videoing them in action. So that's my little bit. And I am very much like that with myself. If I get stopped, I do the right thing. Don't be a geezer. And just listen to what I have to say and have reasons for them to stop you. So that's my last bit. That's my take for everyone else.
And I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right. The other thing on that is you're right. People should record either you or get another person to record it. We were the first force in the country, but now a third of forces are doing it, getting panels to look at body-worn videos. But what we were finding is that not all the officers were recording it. So we're mandating officers to turn them all on. And that was a battle that we're still having all the time. We want a high percentage of officers to use the body-worn video when the interaction with members of the community, or explain why they're not, why they've got no footage. They have to explain to the bosses why that doesn't happen. So we need more people to get that done. But I totally agree with you.
So when the police do come or attend a situation, can you, as a civilian, still say to them, look, I request you to put your camera on?
100%, yes. And you'll know it's on because it would be a red flashing button going, it'll be quiet, right? But that's what it'll be doing when it's recording. So you can tell it's recording. And you should tell them to turn on the camera.
How long do they hold the camera footage for, Montell? I heard it was only 30 days. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, so it's 30 days unless it's going to be used for evidence. So the standard, because they do so much, thousands of interactions with members of the community, it gets downloaded and it will disappear in 30 days. But if they need it for evidence, so let's say a person's been arrested, then they put save and it's kept because it might be needed to go to court. Sometimes, obviously, when the person gets released, because most people who are arrested are discharged, then it can be deleted. However, in Bedfordshire, I've requested it's now saved standard for 90 days. Now, the reason for saving it in our area for 90 days, and that can be rolled off to Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire as well, is because when we were deep diving individual officers, even though they weren't making arrests, we found out that they were stopping searching people who were Black, mixed race, Asian, and we couldn't see any reason. So we wanted to look at the pattern of behavior for people who were not being arrested and charged. So 30 days were not long enough. So in Bedfordshire is 90 days. And it might be 90 days nationally, because I've asked the National Police Chief Council if it could be shared across the whole country, so everybody gets the benefit of the 90 days.
That's good with that extension there, but obviously, in your case, where you would take a look at draw officers' body-worn camera footage, but there would have to be how many reports of maybe police misconduct or abuse of power for you to even draw for that footage. Within that time, 90 days could have elapsed, isn't it?
No, yeah. I got my CD when I asked for it, because they arrested me, released me out 10 minutes of being in the cell. They released me. They came to my address on a false warrant. The bailiff called for the police because they say they had a warrant. But the only reason why a bailiff can call to change a meter, which is what they came to do. And I said, I don't want the electricity meter changed. But they've got a thing where they're trying to get everyone to have a smart meter by 2024.
That's right,
so they're going to the courts to get the magistrates to give them a safety warrant, basically, where they could go and kick in your door if you're there or not, to change your meter for safety reasons.
right? So they came.
Isn't that civil?
Yeah, exactly. So when the police turned up, they had all their cameras running. There was 4 policemen in front of me when they started. There was 12 when it ended, because I did my thing, and because I didn't thump no one, because I didn't do no injury, I just stopped them from arresting me. I had 4 of them up against the wall. They could not move. They called for backup. 8 man come, and then they just grab around the neck and all this. And all you hear in the camera is mind his neck. Don't step on him. Let him go. Let him breathe. Don't let him go. Watch his neck. And I was like, what? This is very nice. It's the best arrest I've ever had in my life. And I've had a dozen of you, right? This is the best arrest ever. And so when it comes to the court case nearly a year later now, because of COVID and blah, 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 going through, they sent me the CD because I asked for it because I'm going to defend myself. Because when it comes to the court case, though, all they wanted to hear wasn't, the man called me Dave Jones or something, because that's the magistrate that signed it. He didn't even know who I was when he's coming to arrest me. We're going to arrest you for prevention of breach of the peace. I goes, your woman here put her foot in the door, which means she's come to escalate shit, right? She's trespassing and you're doing nothing about it. And because I was talking so calmly, even when they arrest me, no, you can't grab me like that, mate. You can't, like, hold on, no, you can't do that. I said, you need to calm down, bro. You need to calm down. But, you must let us arrest you. They were getting hyped and amped, and they wanted to spray me in the report. They wanted to spray me, but they found out that I'm immune to CS gas and all that. I got a tolerance to CS gas, and they found that, but they wanted to taser me and all this. I'm like, wait a minute, you came to do a civil thing. And now because you made it criminal, you put in a CD. So when I thought I was home free because the camera would show all of that. Now, all the magistrate is interested in what I did to the police, what injuries they had, what I didn't do when they told me to do it, like a good slave, right? But I said, look, they were here on a false warrant. What can I do about that false warrant? Where's the IPCC on that one, or the PCC?
What's interesting, Victor, when did that happen?
December 20.
Right, okay, so that was after we did training to officers and sergeants.
It's always after.
Yeah, so
that's what happened.
Good.
Did you see it? Did you see the video?
No, but Victor,
it's great.
Victor, right, is that the way they treated you was better than what you were treated before that day, right?
I believe that, yeah.
Because
this is a very nice arrest. This is the best arrest I've ever had.
You didn't know whether to smile or be angry. You were so confused.
I was sitting on the floor. I was going, yo, because they pulled the shirt off me, man, everything. Okay. I was like, can you get my slippers, please? Yeah. Where are they? I was like, well, can you get me a drink of water, please? Yeah. Safely. Can you get my
what Victor saying, right? So what we've said to
yes, Richard,
is even if the person is a potential offender, you still must treat them with respect and courtesy.
Absolutely.
And not abuse your power.
Yeah. Well, the thing, just a quick thing. I was wondering, because when you're in police custody, right, they're supposed to look after you anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, they did a health check on me.
Yeah.
And then the woman, the nurse there, he was black, by the way, she was going, you got elevated sugar. I goes, because I didn't take my medicine before. You know, I ain't done it all day. They came and arrested me, and that was it. He's like, you going to the hospital? I was like, really? And she goes, yeah, I feel great. It's fine. Just give me my medicine. No, they took me to the hospital, and the police stayed by me for about 5 hours waiting for me to be charged. Then they brought my stuff to the hospital and with the charge papers, and that was it. You see what I'm saying?
So we'll have you, if it's okay with you, Montell, we'll have you on here again?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Yeah. And if you need to know anything, just let me know. I'm more than happy to support you in whatever you're doing. So thank you for tonight.
Yeah, if you have a link to your affiliation, to your group and that, post it up on the WhatsApp, it'd be great.
Yes, okay, I'll do that.
All right, thank you very much.
much.
Yeah, take care.
See you later. Bye, everybody.